Charlie, you want to count?
Yeah.
Let's count.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Charlie, that's close. Let's sing A.
No ABC.
You don't want to sing the ABCs? Say A, B, C, D. No ABCs. Welcome back to the best damn hand history channel on YouTube. And by that I mean the one with the most interesting, ridiculous all-ins, calls, and plays. We like to monkey around here. So, as soon as I get into the 3-5 game, there's a lady who sits into it who I play with a fair amount. She is just a really big action player. Basically, just doesn't fold the 3-bets. Actually, it seems like she prefers cold calling 3-bets because she just likes winning big pots. As an example, within the first few hands, I see her cold call out of the small blind 45. When somebody opens a 15, somebody else makes a 45. Flop comes like 6-6 jack, and she has 6-4 and doubles up. So she limps in a straddle pot for $10 now. I pick up aces. She is not the type of person to limp fold, so I decided to make an exploitative raise size and make it 50, expecting to go heads up here a lot. In these situations, I think it's better to raise big if you know your opponents are going to call big raises. There's no reason to, make a standard $30, $40 raise if you know your customer is going to call. Unfortunately, I apparently don't know my customer very well because she in fact folds. The very next hand, she limps again. I have ace-6 with the ace of hearts, 6 of clubs. I decide to isolate again in the cutoff. I make it 25. Now the button calls, the small blind calls, and she calls. The flop comes 9-8 deuce, all hearts. It goes check, check. I have the ace of hearts. I bet 50 into, I think it's 100 or 125. I can't remember if we went 4 or 5 ways. Player behind me folds. Now the small blind makes it 150. She folds. He's playing about 700. I'm not 100% sure if this is a guy I've played with before, but from my recollection, I remember him doing some funny, weird things. So I decide that he could be getting out of line here with some hands that I have fold equity against. What are they? I don't really know, but I also don't really care. I've got the ace of hearts. We're going to gamble it up. I rip it in there. He snaps. Turn is the 10 of hearts. River's an offsuit ace, and he ends up having pocket deuces for flop bottom set. So we win a pretty nice big one there. I think the pot was around like 1,500, something like that. So that was nice to kind of get there early on and win this pot where obviously I'm a decent dog. In this hand, the player who I had beat with the ace-6 now opens a 15. He gets 3 callers. I'm in the small blind with ace-queen offsuit. Obviously a great candidate here to be squeezing with. I make it 115. He's playing like 500, so I'm willing to get it in against him. If he ends up waking to like queens are better, God bless him. But given that I just beat him in a pot, I think he's going to be A, calling too wide here, B, opening too wide. So I think I'm just going to have the best hand here a large percentage of the time. He folds. The next 2 callers fold. And now the lady on the button, the aforementioned one who had the 6-4, she calls, which I expect her to do a lot here, and super, super wide. The flop comes ace-9-4, rainbow. She's playing like 250. Pot is like 275. This is a spot where I'm going to just lead basically almost my entire range. So I decided to do that. I bet 75. It's probably a mistake here because I should just be making an exploitative check against her. The thing is, if she gets like any piece of this, she's generally not folding. Like if she has a 4, a 9, even like a gut shot, she's just calling it off. So I probably should have checked to hopefully let her pick up some equity and get the rest in on the turn. Unfortunately, she does find a fold. Like I said, I expect her to have just like any 2 here. In order to give another example of how this lady was playing, it's a limp pot. The guy who had the pocket deuces set against me is left with $46 at this point. He jams $46. He gets a cold caller behind him. Now the lady cold calls out of the small blind. And there's a limper who's a player, used to play bigger. He's actually fairly famous for some things that I can't get into. He used to be really, really aggressive. He played bigger, and I think people knew how aggressive he was. So he stopped playing bigger because people kind of knew to pick him apart when he would go multiple streets. So he ends up making it 215 here. When he makes it 215, I think he's doing it really, really wide. I don't think he necessarily has to have like some top 5% hand like Jacks Plus or anything of that nature. So now it folds back to the guy who cold called the 46. He tanks, ends up folding. When he folds, I'm like fairly sure he has the best hand here for him to tank fold. The lady, of course, calls it. Flop comes Jack 7 deuce with 2 clubs. She checks. He pretty much instantly puts her all in for like $200, $250, something like that. She shrugs and calls it off. I don't remember the exact run out, but I think it comes like king 10 maybe, something of that nature. I don't remember exactly. The aforementioned limp rears are 215, shows ace 8 of hearts, obviously pretty damn wide, and she has 6 deuce offsuit for flopping a deuce, holding on and winning a pretty massive pot. The player who folded pre-flop ended up saying that he folded pocket jacks, which I think is a huge mistake. In a game that's been this action-packed, you just can't be folding pocket jacks here. You've under-repped your hand. If the guy ends up having queens plus, God bless him. There's just not much you can do. Sometimes it's just your time to die, You can't be making these big laydowns and these sick games. So at this point, the lady is playing about $800, which is a huge stack for her. Generally speaking, she buys in for the min, which is $200, and because she doesn't like folding, she doesn't run it up that often. Once again, she limps. I have pocket nines, gonna be isolating for value. I make it 25. The button calls, the small blind calls, and she calls. We go 4-way to a flop, which is queen 4-4 with 2 hearts. Goes check, she checks. Sometimes I'll bet here, but I decided to check. The button behind me checks as well. At this point, I'm praying for the 9 of hearts. The turn is, unfortunately, the 9 of diamonds. We were close. Now, the small blind checks. She bets 30, a really small bet. I call, the button calls, and small blind folds. The river is an offsuit 6. She bets 100 into about 200. She's playing about 750, I think, at this point. Something along those lines. I think it's fairly obvious that she has a queen. I don't think she's ever folding a queen. If she has a bluff, obviously she's folding to any raise. I'm going to be raising for value. I decided to just go for max value. I want to make the most here. I don't think she's ever folding. If she has like queen 10, queen jack, something like that, she's just going to call my raise like 400 or 500. So I rip it in there for 750. The player behind me is playing about that much. So obviously I could pray that he has pocket 4s or something, and she has a queen. Anyway, he folds on the button, and she snaps. Not the best news when someone snaps in this spot, but obviously I expect her to be calling with her queens. I roll over pocket 9s, and unfortunately she has queen 4. $724, you said? Yep. Nice hand. I think it was queen 4 of diamonds. Womp womp. That one hurt a bit. Pretty sick 2-outer to get a nice little double for her. I don't think there's much else I can do here. I'm obviously raising. If I'm going to raise like 350, 400, it's not much of a difference. She's probably going to rip it in for 750. I'm not folding. And I like my play. I think it's important when you can put somebody on a hand range and know that they just can't fold. What you expect is often going to be the second best hand. You should be jamming all in all day to maximize your value, because there's a way more combinations of non-full house hands that I beat here. Similarly, she herself could have pocket 4s, maybe even pocket 6s somehow. Unlikely, but possible. So that one was pretty unfortunate. Not much I can do, I don't think. That now brings us to this hand. There is an early position limper. I think it's the guy who I stack with pocket deuces. There's another kid who limps. The lady limps. I'm on the button with 9-7 of hearts. I decide to isolate. I make it 30. This is a hand that I want to be playing, and I don't want to limp along because, A, I'm not going to make a hand very often. B, if I make a flush, I don't want to be over flush, so I'd rather narrow down the field. Obviously, in these games, people don't tend to fold, but I don't mind isolating here. So I make it 30, and we end up going 4 ways to the flop. All the limpers do call. The flop comes ace, queen, 9, rainbow, and now it checks to me. I think I'm going to have a huge rage advantage here as a pre-flop raiser. I don't expect any of these players to have 2-pair plus, unless maybe it's specifically ace 9, maybe pocket 9s. So I decided to bet 50. I don't think I have to bet large, as I do mention. The first limper folds. Now the second guy, a kid, calls. It's somebody that I've played with a couple of times. I remember him doing some goofy things, but I also remember him like making a lot of like big folds to me. So he calls. At this point, I think he could have some draws like jack 10, king jack, since I did bet small, as well as the ace, of course, maybe even a stubborn queen. The lady folds. We go heads up to a turn, which is the 6 of clubs, putting 2 clubs on the board. He checks. I want to start applying max pressure. I bet 170, and he pretty much snap calls me. When he snap calls me here, I think this is indicative of a draw, possibly an ace that just wants me to slow down. The river, unfortunately, is a 6 pairing the board, which I think is a bad card to bluff, because if he has an ace, he expects probably to chop a lot now. Also, if he has a draw, I now beat those draws with my 9, unless it's specifically like Queen X of clubs. I've, already begun telling a story. I maybe it's a bad spot to be bluffing here because I don't expect aces to fold. At the same time, I began telling the story. I want to be representing ace queen plus. I think I'm going to play ace king the exact same way, as well as probably any ace, really, just in order to get him off of chops. If he has an ace and wants to make this big hero call, God bless him. The plan was to rip the river for his 550. So I think for a bit and jam 550, and he goes well into the tank. And once again, please, in the comment section below, let me know, do you think I'm getting heroed here? And what sort of hands do you think he's going to be heroing me with? Now, let's add a caveat. What if I tell you that he shows that he has Queen 8 of clubs, which is second pair, picked up flush draw on the turn, and now, can't beat an ace? Do you think I'm getting called by that hand? Because that is, in fact, exactly what he has. Goes to the tank, and eventually he makes a pretty sick hero call.
Damn!
Kudos to him. He made a good call. He won the pot. I think he could show up with a lot better hands here to be calling. Obviously, all the aces. My bluff is pretty clearly really bad. Like, if he's not folding a queen, he's clearly not folding an ace. I do think that he was around for a couple of other bluffs from, previous sessions. It's possible he watches the vlog. I don't know. Like I said, I think I do kind of hate my bluff here because I don't expect an ace to fold, and I think his range is going to be comprised of a decent amount of aces, and clearly if he can't fold a queen, he ain't folding an ace. So that was a pretty big misstep on my part. But here's the really interesting thing, is that if I ended up checking back and he wins with Queen 8 of clubs, I end up being very mad at myself for not jamming, because I would actually expect this exact hand to fold. So it's really funny how the perspective here is that I actually would have been upset had I checked, which is really, really strange, I think. But it's, I've been in that spot before where I bluff, get called by a pretty weak hand, and then afterwards I'm like, well, I'm glad I bet, because if I checked, I would have been mad at myself. It is rather unfortunate that he did turn a club draw, because I think if he doesn't pick up the club draw, he's probably folding the turn. On the river, once he arrives there, he decides to, put me on some hands that he can beat, and so he calls. I do think that he can find better calls, obviously with the ace. Also, since he has 2 clubs, he blocks some of my most likely candidates to be continuing with here, which are the flush draws, like King, Queen of clubs, Queen, Jack of clubs, 7, 8 of clubs, things of that nature. So I think there are just much better hands that he can find a call with. As I'm going to see later, I don't think he was much of a thinking player. I think he just wanted to put in a sick hero call. People making good calls. Not much I can say other than that. Shortly thereafter, he and the lady both get moved to the main game, so I've got to wait. And when I finally get into their game an hour later, the both of them have essentially just lost almost all of their chips. They both had about 2K. And by the time I get there, they both have 600 or 700, something like that. So that was pretty frustrating. So now that I'm in their game with them, under the gun opens to 20. The player immediately to the left is the kid who called with the Queen 8 of clubs. He makes it 80. The lady is to his immediate left. She cold calls 80. Folds to me in the big blind. I have aces. They're both playing around 400, 450. Obviously, I could flat here to try to get the under the gun player in there. But I think that neither of these players are ever folding, so I want to make a small raise so that I can just get more money in the pot. So I make it 220. Under the gun folds, and both of the players call. The flop comes ace, jack, 5, 2 hearts, I think, something of that nature. They're both short, like I said. They have 200 left, so I just bet to put them all in. They both call. I think the flop runs out deuce 3 or deuce 4, some fairly safe run out, deuce 6, something of that nature. So I end up winning that pot, which, obviously was very nice, but still did not get me unstuck. Ended up losing a little over 1,100 for the day. I'm beginning to think that I want to stay away from sharing the numbers, because this vlog isn't really about the numbers. There's people asking me if I'm a winning player. Duh, obviously I'm a losing player. I can't win. I'm the worst. So I think the numbers just don't really matter. It's more about the hand histories and about the discussion. If you don't think that my analysis kind of is enough, then, what do the numbers really matter? Anyway, about to pick up Charlie. I'm excited to see him. It's been a long day. Unfortunate outcomes, but, you know, it is what it is. I had fun. I love playing these action-packed games. All right, guys. Catch you later.